What's up, everybody? I'm David Hain. Welcome to episode number 283 of the A to D From Addict to Disciple podcast. If you enjoy this podcast, please like, subscribe, follow, and share the link with your friends. If you'd like to get our curriculum, you can get the paperback or ebook of From Ashes to Destiny on Amazon. Again, today's episode is number 283, and it's entitled Supporter versus Neutral versus Underminer. Let me explain that a little bit. This episode was made because as I travel around, I get a lot of questions about how do I make my support system or who goes on my support system. The guys are focused on making a support system that will help them maintain their sobriety when they leave the rehab. So I often will present this topic in rehabs and homeless shelters, in prisons, wherever I'm at, the supporter versus neutral versus underminer. So here it is. Let me start by asking, who do you think of when you think of building your support system? Is it a sponsor, like from AA or NA? Is it a professional therapist or a life coach? Is it a mentor or a pastor or someone you have as a faith-based advisor? Is it a family member or several family members? Is it a friend or a group of friends, or perhaps maybe very close or your best friend? Or is it peers that you met in recovery and they're going through the same thing and you think they'd be good for your support system? But I want to ask you, what do we need from our supporters? Have you ever stopped to think of that? You put down names in your support system, but what do you actually need from them? I'd like to give you some ideas to start you off as you make your list. I would think you need encouragement, positivity, understanding, empathy, listening, and especially listening without judgment. So there's a good start for you. I think it's important for you to jot down, what do you need from people to be your supporters? But I'd also like to add from my side, what is most important and absolutely necessary? For me, number one, and it can be number 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 on your list of things you need, and that is they need to be people who help you maintain your sobriety. You got that? Cannot in any way be people who don't help you maintain your sobriety. And then going along with that, people that you will not manipulate, people that you will not tell half-truths or just what they want to hear, so they'll do what you want them to do. You need people who will challenge you as you're getting stronger in your recovery. And finally, you need people who would lock you up to save your life. So hopefully I've given you a lot of things to think about as you make your list. And that would be for true supporters. And in this, I said it's supporters versus neutral versus underminers. So what makes someone neutral rather than a supporter? I think for me, they're neutral if they're not actively involved. People who are passive or even ho-hum, right? They're not actively involved in your recovery. They'll sit down and listen to you. You think they're a supporter because they support you as a person, but they're not actively involved in your recovery. So therefore, they're just neutral. Or maybe they're not good at encouraging or celebrating with you. This can often be as you're looking at your family members. Well, if they were not good encouragers to you when you were growing up, or couldn't celebrate the little accomplishments you made because they were expecting so much more from you, well, they're not going to change just because you're in recovery now. So you can't count them as a supporter. They're neutral. Another aspect is people who have been your enablers cannot instantly change to be your supporters. And again, one of the key things I said, number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, is supporters must help you maintain sobriety. And in my book, enablers don't do that. They don't help you maintain sobriety. They help you dip and dab very often. It also can't be someone that's been a victim either of your crimes, even if it's just stealing from your family at home, stealing their laptop, stealing their TV, what have you, stealing your jewelry, or it can't be someone who's, just been emotionally abused and victimized in your addiction. Another thing that would make someone neutral rather than a supporter is if they just don't understand addiction. They just don't get it. They're the people that would say, oh, why don't you just say no? Or you made the choice, so it's up to you. Or people who just don't understand recovery. They don't understand the complexities of recovery. They don't understand the challenges, especially early on, of just making another day clean and sober. They need to have a grasp of understanding of that, or they're not able to be a supporter. The best they'll be is neutral. And finally, people who don't understand the wound that led you to addiction. And they may not know right up front, but they need to be willing, as I had said earlier, as good listeners and listeners without judgment. So people that you can explain your emotional wounds and why your drug of choice provided a numbing of that emotional pain and an escape from that reality. And there's a risk in having neutral people as part of your support system. You can lose your motivation just because of the things that is described above. How will you stay motivated when the people that you think are supporting you, the neutral people, are passive or ho-hum? You can feel isolated or alone in your journey because they just don't understand it. And you can quickly fall back into half-truths and manipulation because they seem to have nothing to offer you specifically in regard to your recovery. So you control all the conversations. Okay, the final group I call the underminers. And so you get a picture of what I mean by underminer. It's the people that pull the rug out from under your feet as far as your recovery is concerned. Or have you ever stood on the beach and the waves from the sea are coming in just mid-calf or just over your ankles, and you stand still. And every time the wave goes out, your feet sink into the sand further and further. So underminers are people who weaken your sobriety by using in front of you, by talking about using in front of you, by telling you war stories and referring to it as the good old days. They're people who could offer you a drink or a hit and say, this wasn't your drug of choice, so you'll be okay. Or they could be enablers and can be easily manipulated. They're just those people that are always easy to manipulate and always easy to be enablers. They'll believe any lie you tell them. Or they're people that any relation you've had with them in the past has always been unhealthy, toxic, or stressful. As a matter of fact, living in the same house would be so stressful and so toxic that it would fuel your relapse. So it can not only be just the relationship you had with the people, but the very house itself, the environment, the atmosphere in the house, the arguments, the fights, whatever's going on can undermine your recovery. It can be people who sabotage your recovery by encouraging you to leave your program early because they think you're ready. They think you're strong enough. Or they say they need you and you better come home soon. It can be people that after you finish your program and you're back at home and you're back with your family, they complain when you continue to go to meetings and say, what are you doing that for? And you say, well, I want to do 90 meetings in 90 days, or I want to go, make sure I go at least every week, and I want to be faithful in going to this meeting. And they plan other events on the night that you go to your meeting so that they can undermine your commitment to your recovery. So the risks of having underminers that we're calling support system is we're lying to ourselves, and it truly is self-sabotage. They fuel negative self-doubt in us, and we fail to ever get a strong support system. So in closing, I just want to encourage each of you that each of us need a strong support system. We need to identify true supporters and not hesitate to put other people in the category of neutral or underminers. And you can, over time, work with someone who's neutral to get them to understand how to be a supporter just as quickly as you can take a supporter and make them neutral by the way you're manipulating them. But remember, if we have a strong support system, we will have the result of a better quality of life. We will grow in the ability to handle stress, to cope with disappointments, to deal with life's challenges. We'll grow in self-esteem, in trust of ourselves and others, in resiliency and community. Thanks for listening to this episode of the A to D From Addict to Disciple podcast. If you were saying that's me as you listen, then it's time now to reach out and join a group. It's time to contact people and someone to work with you to develop a good, strong support system that meets the criteria we talked about here. If you'd like to talk to me, you can message me on the link in this podcast or by email at davidfroma2d@gmail.com, or go to my website, www.froma2d.org, and click on the contact page. Keep listening to future podcast episodes, and as always, stay safe and stay resilient.